Good. Okay. Well, we've got 55 attendees now, so I think we'll start. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cowan. I'm a freelance expedition leader. I've been working since 2011 in polar regions. I'm directors of the PTGA and one of the co-founders of the Polar Collective. And tonight I'll be your moderator. What I'm going to do now is introduce all of our panelists. I'm going to start with Franka Leiterer. So Franka has lived on Svalbard since 2016, working as both a ship and a land-based guide, and she is head of the Svalbard Guides Association. So thank you very much for joining us, Franka. So you can see her waving there. Next, we have Ronny Brunvoll. He's the CEO of Visit Svalbard. He's currently completing a thesis on guide competence in Svalbard and is organizing the Svalbard Guide Training Course. So hi, Ronny. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
And next we have Frigg Jørgensen, who I'm sure many of you know. Frigg has lived in Svalbard for more than 30 years, though now is based in Tromsø at AECO's head office. She's the executive director of AECO, responsible for implementing their action plans and ensuring all activities are aligned with AECO's objectives. So she's one of our AECO representatives here tonight. Welcome, Frigg.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Next, we have Karin Strand, who again, I'm sure many of you know. She's worked as a polar EL for many, many years. She started with Hurtigruten in 1998 and was first EL in Antarctica in 2002. So she can speak to many of the places we are going to talk about tonight, but tonight she's going to be our Greenland expert, and she is also currently the chair of the executive committee of AECO. Hi, Karin.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you.
And next we have Brittany Manley. So Brittany is the ops manager for Intrepid, one of the latest IATO members, but she has worked in the Canadian Arctic since 2010, where as well as being a guide, she has worked liaising with communities and agents and deals with permitting. So tonight she is going to be our Canadian Arctic expert. Welcome, Brittany.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone.
And next we have Graham. Graham has worked as a field guide, logistics and expedition leader for 22 years in polar regions. And as many of you know, he is the founder and current president of the PTGA, working to the direction of the board of directors. So he's here as our PTGA representative, as well as someone who's worked in these regions for many, many years. Hi, Graham.
Koto. Thank you, Alex. And just a plug for Tuesday evening, May 9, for those of you who are in Longyearbyen. We will be at Tio Moncho's, the restaurant, and come along. If you ask a question, I'll buy you a drink. So tell your mates. It's a Q&A about PTGA, having a chat up there with folks. We'll see you there.
Thanks, Graham. And next up, we have Phil Hunter coming to us from California. He's an expedition leader who's guided for several companies with long experience in Svalbard and Greenland, and he's here to offer us the expedition leader's view. He's also a founder of the Ocean Youth Academy, so we're very pleased to have Phil here, and he's also running his own operator in Svalbard Arctic Tern expeditions. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, everyone. Nice to see you. Great to be here. Thanks, Alex, and thanks, everyone.
Yeah. And last but not least, behind the scenes, as always, we have Lauren Farmer, running the tech here. She is an expedition leader and guide, a PTGA assessor, and another one of the co-founders of the Polar Citizen Science Collective. So she can't say hello, but Lauren is there in the background. Okay, so we've got lots of attendees here, so we're going to start diving into things. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. You'll see there is a Q&A and so a Q&A function and a chat function. So the chat function is for attendees to be able to say hello to each other, but also to discuss what the panelists are discussing at the same time. So do feel free to talk amongst yourselves. PTGA is a community of guides where we hope there'll be robust and civil discussion amongst the membership. We want to be thinking guides where we don't just do things because that's the way we always do them, we talk about why we're doing them, and we do things for the right reasons. So let's talk about what those right reasons are. There's also a Q&A function. So if you want to ask a question of the panelists, please put that in there. You can all see the questions that are being asked in there, and you can upvote them. So if you think someone's asked a really great question, please give an upvote on that, and then it's more likely to get answered later on. There's also, you may see polls at some point. So maybe if there's something that we're curious what the attendees are thinking, then some polls can come up. So at the moment, a poll has just jumped up. Who is here? Are you a ship-based guide, a land-based guide, an operator? Do you work for AECO or from somewhere else? So you can fill out that poll now just so you can see what those are like. Okay, so we're going to start now by talking about what's happening or what's new for different regions of the Arctic for this coming season. And we know that for the Arctic, it's a lot more complex than it can be in the Antarctic. When we did this panel discussion for the Antarctic, there was pretty much just one set of rules. But of course, in the Arctic, there are several Arctic nations, several different jurisdictions, and different things are done in different ways in different regions. So it's going to be much more complex. And of course, as we all know, it's not always clear what the situation is in Svalbard as well. So do please bear that in mind when we're discussing things, that it's not always obvious what the answer is. So we're going to start by heading over to Canada, to the Canadian Arctic. I'm going to ask Brittany, what is new? And if there's not much new, what do you feel guides should know before going into the field in the Canadian Arctic this summer?
Great, yeah. Not too much new in terms of, well, compared to other regions in the Arctic. So yeah. Keep doing what you've been doing in the past, all your certifications, and of course, brush up on your AECO certifications and all that good stuff. But as Alex mentioned, like the Arctic in general is a very complex region. And so the Canadian Arctic in particular has several organizations that manage that region, especially within Nunavut. So there's several different organizing bodies that manage various items from like the wildlife services, the parks, cultural and heritage, so different permitting and site guidelines for visiting these places. And one in particular that I'd like to always focus on and share is archaeology is a big one that they take very seriously and manage very well, that if you're landing anywhere, likely could encounter. And so just always respect your archaeologist on board and listen to what they say. Even if it's a known site that doesn't have archaeology there, it can always change between season to season. And that's like the archaeologist has that permit under their name. So just respecting that, you know, that's a lot of that they're caring for the whole company and operation within that. And two maps I was going to actually recommend. Oh, I got another pop up here. I'm just going to share my screen for a second. Let me just do that. So one is the Inuit Nunangat map, which Lauren will share links to later, but it's a great resource to be more familiar with the Inuit regions within Canada here. And so that's everything from the Northwest Territories to Nunavut, Labrador, Quebec, to know those areas. And then the other map I would recommend is a nautical chart that the Canadian Hydrograph Services has, and it's a great resource as well to kind of just get to know your bearings and various places, and Lauren will share that link as well. So that's all specifically that I wanted to share. It's not as much to update on. Alex, did you have any additional questions?
That's great. Thank you so much, Brittany. And I see Lauren is already sharing those charts in the chat for people. So I just wanted to reiterate there. So you're saying that even though you might be used to a site not having any archaeological evidence, that could change on a new visit. And so you need to be open to change in that respect.
Definitely. Yeah. And listen to the archaeologists as they clear the site. You know, they should be one of the first ashore once it's cleared for polar bears.
Yeah. And so is that from a federal government level or from a community level that respect for the archaeology is considered so important and worthy of respect?
Definitely both.
Yeah. Both. Okay, that's great. All right. Thanks so much for that, Brittany.
Yeah, Most welcome. Oh yes, Graham.
We have a question from Graham.
Yeah, Brittany, as just to on the flip side, I guess, of the Svalbard Guide standards, are you seeing or hearing anything like that out of the Canadian government or the Canadian provinces that we deal with? You know, whether that might go down that sort of track or not?
Currently not. I mean, there's always discussions, and I think the Canadian Arctic is definitely keeping close watch of what's happening, of course, in other regions. But at this point, as far as I'm aware of, and if anyone knows otherwise, please share. But yeah, not at this point. But definitely like keeping close watch of what's happening there and monitoring that.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to Greenland. So I'm going to call upon Karin now to talk to us about what might be new in Greenland, and also, as Brittany did, really focus on what you think are the most important things for guides to be thinking about when working in Greenland, whether that's Northeast Greenland, the Southwest, or any of the other regions.
Yes, so AECO works diligently through the year with all the regions, and one of the last things that came out is a notice to members just a few days ago, is for everyone who are operating in Greenland, is that there is further clarification from the Greenland Ministry of Fisheries and Huntings regarding implications of a new and revised Greenland polar bear regulations for cruise operators. Which should be noted for everyone who's operating in Greenland for the coming season. It's a revised executive order on the protection and hunt of polar bears. As we know, Greenland still are hunting polar bears alike with Canada. But the essence of this is that it's prohibited to lure, pursue, and disturb polar bears in Greenland fishing territories and on land, which means, if we take this into a practical context, it means that it's now implying that if polar bears are observed from a vessel, the vessel should retreat and leave the area to avoid any disturbance to the polar bear. This would subsequently also mean that it's prohibited to use small boat zodiacs to approach polar bears. So this is something that every operator and every guide need to be vigilant to in the coming season. And there are also some clarifications around drone use. So it means that any kind of film or any way of pursuing polar bears with drones or any other means is prohibited as well. And there will be licenses for polar bear tourism that can be granted for also residents, but that's not really up to us, but that's also clarification. And that the drone is an absolute. So there's no way you can use that to lure any polar bears, which we also see in other regions are coming. Svalbard have the same as well. So that's something that we should all be vigilant to, because there will be an increased focus on these issues from Greenlandic authorities in the time to come. So that's the big new thing for Greenland.
That's great. Thanks, Karin. So I think for the guides and the ELs, like a really big thing there is this idea that if bears are seen, vessels should retreat, and you should certainly not lower zodiacs. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. And just listening to the wording there, it sounds very similar to the Svalbard regulations. Do you think this is an effort to harmonize?
I'm not sure if they have used that as a reason. I think Greenland has acted very much in their own right. I think they have been doing this based on their own merits, on how they want polar bears to be treated in their waters, because there is a very significant change or a difference between Svalbard and Greenland, and that is that they are still hunted in Greenland by Greenlanders, and that means that, you know, in Svalbard, where they're being protected since 1973, you can't put the two alike to each other. So I think they've been doing it on their own keel, to be honest. Yeah,
understood. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. That's I'm sure for a lot of guys, that's exceptionally valuable information, and also goes to show that we should all check up on the AECO website before we go into the field. Yes, Graham.
Karin, not to suggest that anyone would want to break those rules, but do you see, is there any extra effort being put into compliance? You know, Greenland's a mighty big place, but you know, it's good to have those rules, and obviously it's sensible for all professional guides or any guides to be following those rules and regulations. But often with these sorts of things, some sort of compliance checks need to be, you know, help the process.
And it's a very good question, Graham. And if you look traditionally on how Greenland has approached their legal framework and how they have introduced new regulations, it's been on a massive amount of trust to the operators operating in the areas. And there's no exemption in this case as well. So there will be focus, but there will not be controlling as far as we have understood. And what I'd like to just emphasize as well, which I didn't say in my first call, is that for all of you who are guides out there, for your operator, you should contact your operator, and they are being informed regularly by AECO through notice to members. You know, and especially now, I think we're getting 1 or 2 a day, I think, from Frigg and her team. So be vigilant to your operator, the one that you are going to have the logo on your on your uniform for the summer, because they all have this information. And it's important that you as guides are also pushing your operator to give you the information at the right time and with the right context and with the right amount of information. So this is something I would like to implore you all to do, because the information is out there and known. So to you, Graham, no, I don't think there's going to be a lot of controlling of the regulations. Greenland is a very large area. So I think in the first hand, this is going to be regarded as we do respect it, as we are all responsible operators, as we all claim to be. But that there will be coming more in the future, and that they might change their tactics, that could happen.
That's great, thank you. We're getting a lot of questions on polar bear viewing coming in, and we're actually going to save that for a little bit, because we're going to, that is a specific question later on, because this is also, of course, relevant to other parts of the Arctic. But first, we do actually have a question coming about the Canadian Arctic for Britt. And it's asked if you could comment on any restrictions and requests regarding COVID and visiting communities. So apparently in 2022, some were hesitant to have visits. We're wondering if there are any updates around this or requests from communities that have not already been outlined in those updates.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Canadian government has removed those requirements as of last fall. So it just would be up to like each specific community. I haven't been in touch with anyone in particular, so I don't know specifically, but I can, yeah, the best would be to talk with the operator and to find out what their communications has been with that to plan that community visit.
Yeah, okay, so basically it's very much community specific.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on now to Svalbard, and Svalbard we've broken into a few sections. So first of all, there's been a lot of discussion around AECO and the guide standards issue. And so we're looking now to chat to, I think Karin is going to speak to us about the guide standards. Is that correct?
Is correct. Are we starting with that, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
No issue at all. So I'm just going to go through quickly because this is a work that was started. Well, first of all, the first proposal came quite a long time ago. Then that was relatively comprehensive in a way that we were, Franka and others, and me and Frigg and others who were sitting looking at it and evaluating it, found it too cumbersome and we didn't believe that it would be a guide certification scheme that would actually work. So letters were written and our AECO secretariat went straight on, and I'm sure that others also with Franka in the front line did the same. Ronny did the same with his team, and we then managed to get the government on a line where we were getting a group together. And I'm just going to go through what that group actually worked with. Ronny was there, Franka was there, I was there, Truls was there. We were a number of people from the business and from the industry, from government, from universities and others who have guide certification in their backbone. And it is not a guide certification scheme that is in place. It will still be under proposal level for quite a while. So because the new Feltforskriften, which I'm not quite sure how I translate, but it's
field safety regulation.
In field safety. Thank you very much, Frigg, my co-pilot here now for this one, is not set yet. So there is a lot of government regulations that are sort of layering on layering, which means that the guide certification then comes in now as a prep work. And what we ended up with as a group was that we wanted to make this possible for the masses to do. So the e-learning section, we worked on quite a lot, which means weather, polar bear safety, sea ice, glacier, avalanche, snowmobiling, all of this, because we have to remember that this is not just for cruise guides. This is also for the land-based guides, those who are doing winter guiding, those who are doing summer guiding on land. So we had to find something where we can meet. And there were a lot of different approaches to what a guide needs if you're a cruise guide or if you're a land-based guide, if you're a winter guide or if you're a summer guide. So we worked through that a lot over many months last year, ending up somewhere around, I think, Ronny, Franka, we were in December or something when we had finished off our last comments. Then there is a in-field. So the e-learning, we said, okay, well, that is something that the guides can do before, they can do it from home. And then there has to be an in-field section as well. And proposal was that some of this have to be in Svalbard. Some of it can be done elsewhere, but some of it has to be done in Svalbard. So we discussed back and forth. Is it going to be, which section should be in Svalbard? And what we sort of more or less everybody agreed on was polar bear safety. Not necessarily just the shooting, because that is what we really want to avoid, isn't it? So it was more how to deal with polar bear safety in the right element, which means Svalbard, having the right topography, all of that. How did we transition for guides with a lot of experience? Is this supposed to be on a guide level, or is it supposed to be on a company level? What is the fee structure going to look like? And who is going to be doing the certification? Meaning, how do you get your certificate? Course, who does the courses? Who can make courses? Who will be qualified to do courses? And so forth. So it's a relatively big mass of work that has gone into it right now with all the variables, but it's a lot that still remains by putting the final details and the right way of transition periods and so forth, guide ratio and so forth. So I can just as well just say that we've done a massive piece of work, but there's still work to be done. So there's no guide certification scheme for 2023, and most likely 2024 will also not see a finished scheme. But that I cannot guarantee, but the way it's going, it doesn't look like. But there will be coming a scheme, which we all gonna have to comply to in the near future.
That's great. Thanks very much, Karin. I think that's going to be helpful to a lot of guides who are just not sure quite what's going on. And so having an idea of where things are going is really valuable. Franka, do you have anything to add to that?
Always, of course.
Yeah.
No, but it was like I from our side, so from the Svalbard Guide Association side, it was really nice to see that we could sit all together and discuss the topic. Of course, we all have different backgrounds in a way. So for our part, we of course have the guides' interest mainly in mind. So we are still sending lots of feedback separate from what we kind of agreed on or what we worked on in as well, because for us it's really, really important that we're not leaving any guides behind. It's very complicated as we have so many different specializations. We have the winter, as Karin mentioned, so we have dog mushers, we have snowmobile guides, so that's all kind of disconnected to the cruise industry a little bit. And then that's where it becomes a bit more complicated. And also, of course, for us, it's very important that the guides that have years of experience and that already have certification, that this certification, like for example, the Arctic Nature Guide or the PTGA and so on, that certifications will be recognized. And that's a big part that we're still working on, and where we ask a lot of questions. And we've seen now that there's quite some interest there and also awareness of the PTGA. So it is, in a way, we can say very likely that they have to look at recognizing courses, competences, modules, whatever you want to call it, courses. It all depends a bit on how the certification will look like at the end. I think that's the hardest part, to find a system that will work. So I think there's still a lot of realization how complex it all going to be. It's not just going to be 50 guides that suddenly apply to have a certification. So I think they all, like, it will take a lot of time and testing. And I had a long chat with Thomas as well. So they're quite aware of the volume of this plan. Adding to that, there will be, the Norwegian government is working on a guide certification on the national basis. So for all of Norway, and Svalbard will be the test area for it. So for them, the intention is to do a good job in it, sort of like they really want to not just find hopefully half a solution, but to make that also recognizable within other like other countries and so on. So I think there's a lot of work going into it on different levels, not just on Svalbard, but also I think in Oslo there's different institutions working on it.
That's great. I'm sure it's very heartening to guides to hear that quite a pragmatic approach is being taken at the moment, with a lot of viewpoints being taken. Ronny, do you have anything to add to Karin and Franka's points?
No, not really. It has been a good process, and I totally share the idea of this taking even more time, because it's a huge process. So nothing in 23, nothing in 24, I reckon. The thing is that once they've had a new proposal, then they have to have it as a new hearing as well. So it's going to take really a long time, this. So yeah, but we are watching it, and hopefully it will be a good scheme. At least it will be better than it was initially. It looked really bad at the start. So yeah.
That's great. All right. Thank you for that.
I also, sorry, I just want to add also, I think I have been in contact a lot with the Norwegian Guide Association and the Mountain Guide Association in Norway. And there's also a big focus from our side that it will benefit the profession of guiding. So we want this to be something beneficial for the profession and not kind of backfiring on the industry. So in a way, this will hopefully be not a very quick solution, but it will be a good standard for the guides to be starting at, simply because we are working in an environment that is quite extreme, and therefore a certain level needs to be expected.
That's understood. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to new government regulations in Svalbard. So as those of us who work in Svalbard are aware, some new regulations have come in the recent times. For example, with firearms licenses and new regulations to small. So Frigg, I wonder if you could talk to us about these new regulations limiting small vessels and what small means, and what this means for guides, what changes we should expect to see.
Well, I sure would like to do that, but I am not sure I know exactly what you're asking. But let me try, because if we're talking about the 12 passenger sightseeing crafts from mother vessels, there is actually nothing new. The opportunity to apply exemption has been extended to cover 2023. And for those who already have an exemption, they don't need to reapply. But those who don't, they have to apply. What's new, however, is that maybe some of you are not aware, is that the operator needs to register every single 12-pax vessel, craft, boat, using a special link with the Norwegian Maritime Authority. So any small Zodiac or any other vessel on board with a name, number, or in other ways possible to identify must be registered in this register. The regulations, the exemptions, I cannot list all the exemptions and conditions right here and now, but there are conditions attached to this operation. The distance from mother vessel is limited. The speed is, or I should be careful now. Maybe the speed is not limited yet. 2 and 2 vessels together, etc. So you need to look at those special conditions that your operator have been allowed to operate under. So that's for the 12 passenger crafts and exemption when operating from mother vessel. Is that what you had in mind, Alex, or was it something different?
It is, yes. So it was talking about that. So when, if a guide wanted to look up what the exemptions were and what changes might have happened, do they need to go to their operator, or is there somewhere on the AECO website or the Norwegian government website where they'd be able to look these regulations that they're being exempted from up?
There is certainly a website with the Norwegian Maritime Authorities where you can find these details, and I'm happy to share a link after this session so you can share with your audience.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go on the other areas, or?
Yes, why not? So should we go into what is happening with Svalbard firearms licenses this year? I'm sure we're all aware that last year some guides struggled to get a permit to borrow in time. Is this still going to be the same situation this year and into the future?
The regulations are still applicable. So yes, it's the same requirement, but I don't think it's going to be the same situation, as very many obtained their permissions last year. And for that matter, it shouldn't be the same line as it was last year. So because you can't, the permissions you had last year are extended into this year and onwards. But the regulations are in place, but as far as I can see, there are nothing new. So you have to, if you're not carrying a Norwegian license rifle or gun, or have a European passport on your vessel, you have to have import permission on it. And if you are a non-Svalbard resident, you have to and live in Norway, you have to obtain your permission to borrow a license from a Norwegian police. But if you are a foreigner living in Svalbard, you get it from, and all others, you get it from the governor of Svalbard, like last year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
understood.
that's-
And
yeah.
I think most or maybe all of them issued last year don't have an expiry date. So I think all of us, if we applied last year, it is still valid today. So you don't need to keep applying, but people should check their permit to borrow to be sure of that.
That's correct.
Great. Just going back to the changes with the Zodiacs, Phil, just curious what changes you've seen last year in Svalbard with the small boats, just so the guides can hear examples of where you've been exempted and where you haven't. Did you see any changes?
I didn't see any changes really from my side. We ran operations pretty cleanly. There was obviously some of the smaller vessels were running with float coats and using those instead of having people dress for shore landings, for instance, and then going out in Zodiacs and just doing a Zodiac cruise. But the larger vessels were running per normal, just all throughout the season and running Zodiacs pretty cleanly, just like we do in the Antarctic.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah,
Frigg-
may I add to that, Alex?
Yes.
Because there is a distinction between landings using the Zodiacs as a tender boat and doing the Zodiacs. So if you are landing, and that means the shortest possible distance from the mother vessel to land, you are allowed to do that without the flotation suits or a similar protection as a flotation suit will give you. But if you're doing any sort of cruising, also during the operation of tendering, you have to follow the regulations, 12 passenger regulations, as they are spelled out in the conditions. There is an exemption to it, but there are conditions to it.
Understood. And how long do you think these exemptions might continue for? Is that an unknown?
That is an unknown, and as some of you may have picked up from the local newspaper, there is a strong interest with the governor of Svalbard to limit the opportunity for sightseeing from mother vessel. And this was spelled out in an article in Svalbard Post not too long ago. So it depends on the total picture, as Karin explained, with all these regulations on top of each other and the political landscape in Norway.
Okay, thank you. Ronny, do you have anything to add on the firearm regulations and licensing system in Svalbard at the moment? Can we expect to see any further changes than we've seen so far?
Not that we know. The regulation is here now, and we don't think there will be the same chaos. It didn't become chaos in the winter season, at least. So I think this will work better now. But bear in mind that the governor has announced that they will have a lot more controls in field this summer, with a particular focus on the expedition cruise segment, I reckon. So be sure that you all have all the papers in order.
Yeah. So when you say, sorry, I'll get to you in 1 second, Franka. So when you say controls, do you mean inspections by?
Inspection, yeah.
Understood.
So there will be a lot more. They will give priority to the summer season in order to feel that these field police, whatever they call it, field inspectors, they call it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they will go by the governor's boat, and they will perform a lot more inspections on the cruise operators. So be aware of the firearms and also on everything regarding the polar bear, obviously. It's
understood. Frigg, you have your hand up, and then I'll get to Franka.
Yes, I do, because on the issue of inspection, both the maritime authorities and the governor has announced that they will intensify the inspections. And for the maritime authorities, it is annual focus areas. And this year, focus areas are, in addition to emissions and pollution and garbage, it is small crafts. So you can expect that there will be inspections related to documents and the equipment and the way you operate with these small crafts.
Okay, thank you. And then Franka, you had a note, and maybe you could also remind us what papers we should be carrying with us in the field if we are inspected.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I just wanted to say they already started with the controls, and we did not have any field inspectors this winter season. And one of the reasons I was given when I was asking Sysselmesteren about it was that they will have more inspectors this summer. So they're focusing a lot on the summer season. They're also controlling weapon lockers. So the way they are mounted, how heavy they are, etc., etc. So how weapons are stored, how they are carried, and all that, of course. So of course, when you're out, you need to bring your permit or your license, depending on what you have. And then also in case you're borrowing, you need to have the paper ready about the rifle that you're borrowing. So that should be in order. Depending, I don't know how the big cruise ships handle it, but yeah, the smaller ones usually have their papers at hand. And you need to be able to identify yourself. That's for sure. On a small note, I don't know if that is so applicable to too many guides this summer, but the governor has also started to increase their controls regarding the driving licenses. So there is big changes, maybe something that is more more applicable for guides that work land-based. But important to mention, there are some changes here as well, and you need a special permit from Sysselmesteren to be able to drive guests. And that again now, last season, I think they said we don't necessarily need it, but now a guide was stopped and actually has to pay a fine because she didn't have the card for it. So now that is up for discussion again. It's like a little blue card that you need to be able to transport guests from A to B. And also we don't know yet how the solution will be in general with the driving licenses according to the Vienna Convention. So that's something the guides need to keep an eye on, simply, if they are able to continue driving. That is also counting for snowmobiles on Svalbard.
Okay, are you talking about cars here when you say driving?
Yes, cars and snow scooters. So yeah, there is kind of a little bit of a gap. Maybe Ronny can actually talk more about that, about the driving licenses. There is a bit of a tricky situation here on Svalbard.
Okay, understood. Okay, Phil, I'm just curious if you experienced any inspections last season in Svalbard. I know quite a few happened.
You know, Alex, I kind of dodged that bullet. We were fully expecting an inspection. We had all our papers ready, and we made sure all of our guides were carrying that religiously as we went out in the field, but we weren't stopped once, not on any boat that I was working on. And in fact, Franka, if I can ask you just a question really quick, you mentioned that guides should be able to identify themselves. Does that mean carrying, say, a copy of your passport with you, a photo ID of some sort, along with the other stuff?
Well, I guess your passport itself, maybe even. I guess you need to be able not just to have a copy, but you need the original. That was what I was told, that you also need the original of the license with you. In terms of if you're borrowing it, you need to carry that with you. And I guess you need to have a valid document to show that it's really you. I had the opposite of you. I was controlled on every single trip. So
Wow.
Yeah. So I met them. They were super nice. That to add that, like, the inspectors were very kind, chatting to the guests, and the guests really enjoyed it. So that was always a very entertaining moment. But yeah, they definitely did their work, and they also checked the passports of the guests.
Okay, some good food for thought for the guides. So we're now going to move on from these Svalbard regulations, but before we do so, Frigg has some AECO information for us, some very important points that we should all be aware of before we go back into the field this summer. Frigg, do you have some slides you would like to share, or would you prefer to talk?
Yeah. No, let me share some slides if that's okay. You see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think you're well familiar with most of these if you are working for an AECO member. But it is there are some mandatory requirements, including the field staff assessment, which you have to pass every year. Of course, the cruise database registrations of sailing plans, and not at least a post-visit report. And we urge you to be precise in these reports now. We are so much depending on correct data in our discussions and work on legislations and consultations. So please help us in this area if you can. As you know, Svalbard has, or AECO has a number of mandatory guidelines, more than 50 mandatory guidelines. This includes 2 community-specific guidelines in Svalbard, Longyearbyen and Ny-Ålesund. And please pay attention to these guidelines, because it is expected from the local communities, and not at least from Ny-Ålesund, who over and over again has complained about our members not following the radio silent requirement in and around Ny-Ålesund. There is a complete radio silence requirement, and please look it up at the back of the Ny-Ålesund community-specific guidelines if you're not familiar with it. Running the red port is also a requirement from AECO, as is incident reporting, which is has a specific form and should be sent to AECO as at the earliest possible time. If it is a safety issue and it could be regard others, do not delay this at all, as we may be sending out a red alert to other operators in the area. Also, we have this strongly recommended tool for you to make use of, the off-vessel risk assessment tool. And not only does it include a lot of relevant information, and it is a good tool to do a risk assessment, but it gives you a documentation on having done the risk assessment. So if anything happens and you're able to show that you made the risk assessment before making a landing, you will stand so much stronger if there is any kind of investigation. The Clean Seas project, and specifically the Clean Up Svalbard efforts, the reports from those efforts are lacking to AECO, which means that we're not able to document that we have actually brought to shore or to Longyearbyen so much garbage over the year. So again, we urge you to be accurate and to take the time it takes to fill in the kilos or bags or whatever it is that you have involve your passengers in picking up. It's going to prove valuable for all of us. I would also like to, as Ronny said, there has been a lot of attention to the controls that or the inspections that they are that they have signed now, but there are many other headlines in the newspaper that is not putting the cruise tourism in the best light. And for this reason, it is even more important than ever to try to turn this tide. And one of the efforts that's it's not one because it's a major effort that has been put in place, called Svalbard Cruise Forum. The Svalbard Cruise Forum is a collaboration between all major entities in Svalbard who are now trying to coordinate any challenges, both challenges and opportunities in cruise tourism, but first and foremost challenges to lower the increased negative attitude towards tourism locally, and to work to increase value and to ensure sustainability in this activity. So when you get a message from your operator that please do not hand out food to your passengers at the airport, that may be a message from the airport from Svalbard Cruise Forum. There are also other messages out there, for instance, not to leave a passenger in Longyearbyen at the hospital by themselves if they are not able to administrate their own bookings of a return flight or a hotel while they wait for a flight, etc., etc. We are putting strains on the hospital the locals are not receiving whatever services they normally would get, and this is stressing. This is very stressful on the local community, and it ends up as negative headlines for the industry. So what I would also like to mention some positives, because, for instance, there is a book list out there from Svalbard Museum that you can make use of. There is a list of products and producers of local produced food, goods, souvenirs, etc., that you can guide your tourists to or buy yourself. And there is also an effort now to establish a meeting point at the visitor house at the harbor. And if everything works out, we're also trying to establish something called the field staff corner, and it will be behind half walls, so you can have some protection from all the guests. But there you will be able to most times talk with someone who knows things you should know, or pick up stuff. We have some poster from the Norwegian Polar Institute, some marine mammals, etc. And and you will have Wi-Fi you can use, and there it could be a meeting point. Maybe there is an opportunity to post messages to others, etc. I just want to mention that Svalbard Cruise Forum is working hard on these efforts, and take them seriously when you get the instructions from your operators, because they have a larger meaning than maybe the single effort. I think that was it for the slides, Alex. Let me know if you want something more.
Thank you. That's great, Frigg. I see Graham has his hand up, but first I'd just like to re-plug the OVRAT. It's definitely worth downloading well in advance of your season and having a play around with it. There's some very surprising and useful information in there. I now use it every time I'm about to make a landing. I'll take a look at the OVRAT, because there are some closed areas that I didn't know existed, but they're there on the OVRAT, and you need to make sure everything is downloaded before you get into the field. So start playing with it, I would say tonight. Get it downloaded, start messing around. It's an amazing tool. Yeah, I really recommend making use of that as much as you can. Graham.
Thanks, Frigg and Karin. Take my hand thing off. I just have a question about, you made note there of the incident reporting. PTGA is not currently an AECO member, but we get asked a lot by guides when we hear of incidents, especially the bigger incidents, I guess, which make the news and things. So my question to either Karin or Frigg is, what are you doing? What's happening with the incident reporting? And you're an industry trade association, so of course that information can get to operators, but how is there any sort of plan or strategy for the future for the learning from incidents that have happened in the field to actually get to guide level, and how, you know, how can we collaborate, or is there any strategy to get to guide level to guides who may not be directly associated with an AECO operator?
Well, to the latter, I would have to say no, we do not have a particular strategy to get it to the guys who are not connected to AECO or IATO. But because, as you may recall, the field staff conferences, unfortunately, the one we had to cancel this year, but it was a platform for transfer of lessons learned as well, and for discussions of incidents and lessons learned in an open forum, and sharing in a sharing culture. And to your question about what happens to these reports, well, first and foremost, they go into a quite professional system called the Raven system. The Raven system is an international system for incident reporting, and it's quite sophisticated how we deal with it in the action. And then at the end of the season, we summarize all these incidents, small and larger, and then bring it to the CDRC, the Compliance and Dispute Resolution Committee in AECO, and to the EC, and then to the annual meeting for reporting if necessary. on a general basis with lessons learned, or specific basis if it's major incidents. I don't know if that answers your questions.
No, it does to a point. I guess it's still, there's still not an easy answer for me, or when guides contact the PTGA asking, not looking to blame or anything with a particular incident, but just wanting information because they want to be better guides and find out what happened. And it seems like, this seems like it's still a long way to go for the entire industry, north and south. Before we have easy sharing for guides. And I'm happy to go on record to say I think this is a real shame, and it's certainly something that we'll be pushing over the coming years for sure.
And if I might just come in on there, and I agree, Graham, to a certain degree, but there is also operator liabilities we need to understand when there is an incident happening. So coming out to the guides immediately might not even be at our privilege. So there is a timeline that we probably have to find, and although guides would like to have it, with the modern kind of culture we have, we wanted to have it instantly, rather yesterday than today and even tomorrow. So what I think the essence we need to keep in mind is that there is a bigger picture at stake very often when we have an incident which really has an impact and want to be where we all want to be better guides. So I think we need to look at both ends. And then as you're pointing out, and also we have been talking, Frigg and others in EC, is to look at where are we in 2023? What kind of methods do we use to reach our field guides now versus what we have used in the past? So I think there is a way to go on where to is, but also the understanding of process that comes with major incidents and so forth.
Thank you, Karin. I think it's really valuable to hear that sometimes there's a bigger picture going on that we're not aware of. But certainly I would say from an EL point of view, and maybe Phil or Franka might have a comment here as well, that when the operator knows something, it so rarely sort of filters really through to the guide level effectively, I would say. It's, the guides are the ones having the incidents and potentially like making the mistakes often in the field. Finding that way to really, even if there's no lesson to be learned, but just hearing what happened for us to sift away into the back of our heads can be a really valuable thing to just, for the next time something similar starts to happen. Yes, Franka.
Yeah, like definitely. We also see that here, especially we have so many snow scooter incidents. It doesn't matter who it happened to. It doesn't matter, it's not about the names or getting more, interesting information. It's about, okay, where was it? How can I avoid this? Is there any learning? Is there maybe a place that we see more and more accidents occur? Maybe if we see that, we should avoid that place altogether. So it's kind of from the guide side, we are really curious and very eager to see if there are certain areas that are hotspots for accidents. And that has nothing to do with the education of the guides or the quality of the equipment or whatever, but it's really just to see, okay, do we need to change what we've been doing for years because the landscape changes? We have that quite often in moraines. They become steeper, they become more rocky. Is there something that we actively can do to prevent accidents and also to support the guides, maybe even support the companies in finding alternatives? So having any kind of that information completely unrelated to who or when shared is a huge win for the guiding community because it's always a huge learning outcome.
Yeah, Frigg.
Yeah, I don't disagree with this. I just want to, again, advertise the ORAT because the ORAT also includes a notepad where you can note experiences from that particular site. And if used wisely, it can form the basis of experiences and lessons learned. And there was actually a conversation going on with Svalbard Safety Center at some point for them to take that ORAT information and experience to the next level, and how to see to how we could avoid these potential incidents on sites in the future. So please use the ORAT.
Thanks, Frigg. Yeah, that's another surprising feature of ORAT to me, is that sort of effectively messaging feature per site. Phil.
Yeah, and just to add on to Franka's point, I think it's important for locations, certainly, but also activities. We can feel really comfortable as guides as we go out into the field and do our jobs. We can feel comfortable going kayaking. We can feel comfortable doing hikes in certain areas, or going along glacier fronts. But getting a record of certainly incidents, but near misses, and getting an idea of the frequency at which this stuff happens, I think would lead to just a really enlightening moment for guides around the industry to really know how risky some of these actions can be and some of these activities can be, and just getting an idea of that would be really important as well.
Thanks, Phil. Before I get to Franka and Graham, there's a question from the Expedition Guide Academy, whether the incident reporting is anonymous, or if it's people or operators get named there. I suppose somebody's asking from a guide's point of view, will their name come up in an AECO meeting?
It can be anonymous. It is preferred that it is not, because the reporting process and dealing with it is based on the communication between the accused party and the accusing party, and it goes a bit back and forth. But if there is a serious risk for the guide, if it is a guide reporting, and especially if it involves their own operator, it is an opportunity to stay anonymous. So yes and no.
Okay, thank you. I think Franka had her hand up first.
Beat you on that, Graham. No. What I wanted to point out is that we actually started as the Svalbard Guide Association. We have this yearly guide conference in the winter, and we started having guides speaking up and talking about their own moments of guano happens. So when things doesn't go as planned. And I'm very proud of the guides being able to speak about this, and the learning is very, very big. So in general, I really encourage guides to contact the PTGA, because I know that Graham has in the newsletter also this section of when guano happens, and people can write about it. Yeah, I think from mistakes, in a way, we learn the most.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Franka. Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And just to reiterate, once again on the record, yes, I fully understand the bigger incidents and that due process that's well outside of, perhaps, well, outside of AECO and certainly PTGA's realm of knowledge. I fully understand that must go on. And just for the record, one of the more surprising things that I find about my role, and it's completely understandable, and to back up what Phil said, and also Franka from the guide level, is the number of people who get in touch with me thinking that PTGA has the answers or the inside scoop on these incidents. And what I do want to say is, absolutely unconditionally, anyone who contacts me with this sort of inquiry is not interested in blame culture or finding out who or what company might be a bad operator or perceived or anything like that. They just simply want to know what happened so that they can avoid the trap. And I think that's really healthy. And I believe that moving forward in the coming years, that'll be a sure sign of the maturation of the industry when we can start sharing that down to guide level.
Yeah, thanks for that, Graham. But yeah, that's a great point from Franka as well, that we guides, we don't have to go through operator level, but we can share directly with each other. Frigg.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, I don't I don't think there is any object or reluctance to sharing what we can share with anyone who can learn, and we can avoid the incidents. I think it's a question of finding platforms for doing it, or methods for doing it. And also, I think also you can rest assured that most of the incidents that we have, that we deal with, that are reported to us, are not of the kind where it's an absolute learning there and then. It may not be as serious as it looks from the headlines of the report. It's not always a learning issue. But we don't object to sharing these kind of general learnings under certain conditions. So let's just work on this, Graham and Alex.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about, I think was the elephant in the room, well, the polar bear in the room, which is viewing polar bears, especially for, I think a lot of us here will be from the summer-based ship tourism side. And there's a certain history to this tourism where we frequently do view bears from ships, and we have viewed bears from zodiacs, and we see bears and we've gone closer in the past. And so this is an opportunity for us to now discuss what is and isn't acceptable, both from regional and government points of view, and also a general ethical point of view as well, like what's an acceptable thing for us to be doing as operators and as guides. So first of all, let's go to Karin's update on Greenland about if we see a bear, we should vacate the area. We had a couple of questions from some guides in the chat. First of all, asking if polar bear is seen, is the ship allowed to stop and give the guests a chance to observe the ship, or does the ship have to just immediately leave the area?
I think, I mean, this is up to the behavior of the bear, really. If the bear is approaching the ship, you should vacate and get away, because you could come into the borderline situations of where it might come too close, and meaning that it senses the ship more than it should, which could go under the lure categories. But stopping and looking at the bear but it will, for guides and expedition leaders, be very important to watch the behavior of the bear and then move away as soon as it looks like it has either been bothered or it is approaching the vessel. But viewing the bear in principle is not illegal. It's just not allowed to pursue or lure. So it's that fine balance that guides need to have in their backbone when they are out there. I think there was one question as well around if we could just then hire a hunter for some trophy. That is not that's not, I would say that's not what a responsible operator would do. So that's not something we would do, no. Not at all. And if it's not explicitly in the law, there is something as common sense that you take into account, and that is basically on the common sense level. You don't do that. So just be cautious and be good at what polar bear behavior means to our viewing. Basically, that's what I'm going to say. Yeah. So it's not a yes or it's not a no. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. And so there's another question about if you're out in zodiacs and you see bears, are you expected to get those zodiacs back to the ship, or can you also view from the zodiacs if you're at a reasonable distance and the bear is not aware of you and not approaching?
May I respond to this, and to also to comment on because I as you have pointed out, there are some areas there are no yes and no, and these are the areas where it is not for AECO to interpret the regulations, but for us to read as you read them and to try to understand what they say. So when when the regulations state that you should not, if you translate it, approach polar bears, that is what you shouldn't be doing, approach polar bears. And if the regulation says leave the area, it means leave the area. But and there are situations where this can be interpreted, but for us to say that you can do this and you cannot do that, that would be a high risk, huge risk for us to take. What I will say, however, especially in Svalbard, is that even if the regulations that have been proposed have not come into force, I think you can rest assured that those who have suggested these regulations or support these regulations will be very vigilant to what's going on in the field and try to find examples of the need for these regulations. So if there is doubt, withdraw. Get out of the situation. Do not create doubt for those to get arguments for a 500-meter distance in the future.
Good. Yeah, Franka, you had a comment on this.
Yes, in a way, because I live here, as Frigg said, we get a lot of this nice feedback from either Sysselmesterens side or also from the local newspaper. And it doesn't matter when or how the picture's taken, it always looks bad. And I have to say that every time I have a meeting with Sysselmesteren and it is about the polar bears, they come up with all the Instagram pictures, Facebook pictures that they can find. I kind of feel they have someone employed up there just looking for them. And they will use that. They use that as an indicator. And I have to honestly say, I don't understand why we're getting so close. Like, I don't understand why we need to push that moment where it says like the bear should not be disturbed. Well, if you see the bears disturbed, you have disturbed it. So don't even get to the point where you need to question yourself, will I disturb the bear or not? It's nobody is winning from the situation, not the bear, not you as a guide, maybe not even the company that has to pay a fine. You create a dangerous moment for the animal, for the guests. And in general, like viewing a bear from a zodiac is, of course, I understand that the guests are super happy about it. But if you as an EL make very clear from the beginning that as soon as there's a bear, no zodiacs are getting down onto the water, you never even get into the moment that they want it. So don't create the opportunity for people to want to be 20 meters away from a bear. There are documentaries, beautiful documentaries about polar bears where you see them close. Watching a bear from 500 meters through binoculars is a unique and absolutely a special experience. You don't need to be that close. It's just it's not all that Svalbard is about. And I think it's a challenge for every guide and every EL to make the guests understand that and make the guests see the other beauty that is out there. It's not just about the bears. And I think that is something we need to maybe work on. I don't know, but there's a huge focus on having a portrait picture of a polar bear eating a carcass. We don't need it. It's just to be home, showing it to a friend. Nobody needs it. It's just not important. And I think that's what maybe our biggest challenge is, to keep that in mind, because that's what we do. We protect nature. We are not protecting the polar bear by putting 20 zodiacs around it and taking profile, close-up pictures of it eating. That will not protect the bear.
Yeah, thanks, Franka. Phil, maybe you'd have some comments here on the challenges ELs face with that thinking when they've got certain marketing standing behind them that people have read and paid for when they've bought the trip.
Sure. Yeah, the marketing is out there, and polar bears are such a focus of Svalbard, and it's one of the reasons that people know about it. It's a wild destination to see polar bears, maybe the best out there. It's a challenge to convey that to guests for sure. And while we all want to protect the wildlife that's in Svalbard, polar bears, walruses, etc., we often do face pressure from the guests, and we also face challenges with dealing with bridge teams. Looking at captains that have done something in a certain way for 25 plus years, and they have these certain ideas about how they can approach bears, and they are very proud of how they can present opportunities for bear viewing to guests. And I think it's really important that not only you approach this subject with your guests and say, listen, we are here to protect the wildlife, we don't want to disturb, or even get to the point where we're questioning if we are disturbing wildlife or not. We need to be having these conversations all the way up the chain to our captains and to our chief mates, and making sure that those guys are on the same page. And it's the responsibility of operators to say that to their captains, and it's the responsibility of ELs to have that chat with captains for each change that comes on board as people rotate through the season. I find that you can think one thing as an EL, but if your ship does approach closer, then that's ultimately your responsibility in a lapse of communication. So that I think is as important as talking to your passengers about this as well.
Very good. Brittany, are you able to give us any advice on the Canadian communities and also government view on polar bear viewing and approaches?
I would say it's similar to what Franka and everybody else is saying, is definitely be respectful, and if you notice that it's being disturbed, like, you shouldn't have approached it in the first place. In that they do take it quite seriously, and especially we've heard of reports of, like, say, like a yacht vessel has come in and they're taking a drone and harassing a bear, and we have footage of that and have reported it. So they do take that seriously, and there are fines and items to follow up with that. But it's tough to police, but important to respect that space.
Yeah, I think for a lot of guides, this thinking that we want to respect polar bears is a very common thread through our lives and our careers. But I think where some of the things regulations are saying means a change in the way of working. And I don't know, Frigg, if there's anything more we can do to reach out to guides and to operators to say that maybe this is we have a new style of operating ahead of us that maybe we should have been doing for a long time, but now's the time to actually really start doing it and enforcing it.
To be honest, I was quite amazed with Franka's statement right now, and I think it was strong. It makes an impression. If this is something that there is a general sentiment in the guide, the group around, and if there's issued some kind of statement from you on that in that direction, I think that's something we can work with. I don't know exactly how, but I see opportunities in it.
Good. Graham.
Question for Frigg. We haven't discussed this or where it went. I know a while back you were seeking some information about other industry standards with other bear viewing and other large mammal viewing around the world, just as looking for what other industry standards there might be. Did anything come of that?
What we've used that for is to provide some additional comments to the Ministry of Climate Environment that we were invited to do a month ago. So it's in part of the comments that we now have provided, where we point to maybe alternative distances and ask for not a 500-meter distance, but a shorter distance. We have suggested 100 meters, but that's only a suggestion from us, and nothing we can count on being regarded. But we work for that.
So yeah, I think all of these are very good examples, especially as you said there, Frigg, of guides needing to use good judgment. So use their experience and apply good judgment, not just to the animal, but to the wider industry and how we're representing ourselves and other companies and AECO in general. And so, yes, there's no hard and fast answers, but if you're in doubt, then maybe there shouldn't be that much doubt, not as much doubt as we think. Okay, I think we're going to move on from bears here, unless any of the panelists have any further comments on that. We have a few more questions now from the attendees. So first of all, if we could have any, there's some curiosity around what the exact requirements for weapon storage is on vessels, or where we can go and find that information.
Franka, do you know?
Yeah, that lies in the weapon law. Oh yeah,
Yes.
Franka.
That
Yes.
lies in the weapon law. So if the weapon locker is lighter than 150 kilo, it needs to be mounted in the permanent part of the structure of whatever. So kind of, yes, but I'm not sure if just the wall counts or if it has to be a solid wall. That I'm trying to find out, because my apartment has a lot of not so solid walls. So I'm a bit unsure if it's actually.
No, then it's floor and wall.
Exactly. So you kind of have to look into that. And it's also, of course, sometimes possible to store essential parts of the weapon in that locker. So you not necessarily have to lock away the whole weapon. But yeah, it depends on if you have a shotgun or if you have a rifle. Ammunition, of course, has to be locked away. And it has to be locked away in a way so people cannot easily get access to it, of course. So a weapon locker that is in a locked up room, for example, that only the weapon master has access to is, of course, ideal, something like that.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. There's a few guides commenting that they're struggling to get OVRAT to work on their particular model of phone. Who should they reach out to deal with that?
That would be AECO at aeco.no. And then we will, we will forward it to the right person.
That's great. And I see that has just gone out into the chat now. So those of you who are having trouble downloading on your phones, there's the email address. You can get that sorted well in advance of your time in Svalbard. Thank you, Lauren, or anywhere in the Arctic, in fact. I have a question from Domsky. Hi, Domsky. Just asking about Hapag Lloyd's unfortunate incident at Phipsawyer a few years ago, whether we know if there's any going to be any review coming out in the future that we're aware of.
No, not that we are aware of. And I have to add that Hapag-Lloyd at that point was not a member of AECO. So it's not a case that AECO is handling. So it's only for the authorities. And as far as we know, there has not been public information available on this.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Frigg, for that. Yeah, I think that from what we know of that incident shows the value of information sharing and knowing where there's very high value bear habitat and the places to avoid. We had one more comment from an attendee regarding the comments we had on polar bear viewing. They said, I think clarity is key with regard to bears and what can and cannot be done. We have to communicate this to guests, not only on board, but at the time of booking a trip to manage their expectations. So I think those operators and marketing departments who are listening here, that's a good way to work with your onboard teams, maybe to manage expectations well. Graham, you had a comment.
Yeah, Alex, I think you and I talked about this, but just I know we're closing in on the finish of the session, but just to highlight that with the incredible amount of precipitation and snow accumulation in Antarctica this year, people quickly found out that guides were now having to manage for a new risk, which hadn't been a particularly common risk in Zodiacs and or lower key shore excursions, but just to put on the record and a general call out for all guides when working in Svalbard or Greenland or anywhere where there's been a lot more precipitation and snow accumulation, to please take that into account for your situational awareness, deciding and or if you have a qualified mountaineer or avalanche person with you to have them make some decisions for you, so that we don't either be driving around underneath loaded snow slopes or walking on loaded snow slopes.
That's great. Thanks, Graham. Franka, were you saying there'd been a lot of snow in Svalbard this spring?
Yep, lots of
Yeah.
lots of snow this season. Also up on the glaciers, we have more than 2.5 meters of snow, and down in Hornsund, that's been a record in the last 20 years. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. Spring is approaching, so we do have some nice. Yeah, we're expecting some avalanches on the steep terrain, especially close to bird cliffs. Maybe keep that in mind.
That's great. Thank you, Franka. And I think something very much for us to be aware of in boats, because we're quite frequently not that close to shore and maybe in an avalanche run out zone, but actually is terrain traps. I think is an important thing to think about. Like, what feature, if it's suddenly filled with snow, could you be inside? I think that suddenly becomes something for us all to be aware of. Another question here that I think is going to get us towards the end. Are there any strategies in place for dealing with the fallout from non-AECO members when viewing bears, as social media is already full of early season bear encounters?
Well, I wish you would have the governor here to answer that. It's a difficult question, Alex. We as an association do not have any authority over non-members. It happens. We have some contact and we reach out sometimes on personal basis, but really we don't have the authority. So I just want to encourage everyone who thinks it's value in being part of the committed and then responsible operator association to encourage their parties to become a member, so we can work together.
Excellent. Thank you, Frigg. So we have no other questions, so I think it's time to wrap up. I'd just like to thank again all of our panelists for giving us their time and expertise. We really value you being here, and I hope the attendees and those who watch afterwards will get a lot of information of value from this, and at the very least some food for thought. There is some links in the chat that Lauren has put up. So if you're looking for that AECO email, the 12 passenger regulations, several other things, those are all currently in the chat. So that's it from us. So again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to Lauren for doing all of the back end, and see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I know.
And just throw in one more thing. We are setting up every Wednesday now. There will be a guide evening at Theos Monchos for any guide to be welcomed, regardless of company, to just share a meal, have a chat, exchange whatever you want to. And it's always from 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock. Theos Monchos is preparing food. It's a bit cheaper for us guides. Come in if you are in town, if you have an overnight or whatever. We would love to see you there.
Thanks, Franka.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye.